The Hoffman Show, we're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/at the Team 980. And joining us now is Lisa Banks, who is one of the attorneys for the more than 40 former Washington football employees who have helped bring everything, waves arms wildly, Lisa, everything to light, along with obviously tremendous reporting by ESPN, the Washington Post, New York Times, and such over the past couple of years. Lisa, thanks so much for your time today and coming on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So I wanted to start very broadly. Obviously, Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham put out a new story with a lot of new information, really a lot more detail yesterday, and just broadly what your reaction was reading it.
Well, I think it's less an article than a novella.
Yeah.
So it takes a while to wade through it. But it's tremendous. I think the reporting is amazing. It's eye-opening in some respects, and yet I think for people like me who have been immersed in this saga for the last 2-3 years, it really doesn't come as all that much of a surprise.
I think one of the things that struck me, Lisa, reading it was obviously the details, which we'll dive into here substantively in a moment, but the details of, Roger Goodell and Dan Snyder and this kind of negotiation. I don't even think it's this negotiation that Dan has on his own punishment. And it's something that some of your clients, Megan and Melanie in particular, have been kind of hinting at. They kind of said, we have this feeling that it's even deeper. The league and Snyder were in more cahoots than people even realize. And obviously a lot of us from reading the previous reporting realized that tie was already strong and the common interest agreement existed. But how much of that was things that you either tangentially knew, and how much of what Don and Seth were able to uncover yesterday what kind of confirmed things in a way that you may have felt but weren't fully aware of?
Well, I think their reporting certainly confirmed what we suspected all along, was that Dan Snyder was intimately involved in determining exactly what was going to happen to him as a result of Beth Wilkinson's investigation, which is to say not much, right? But I think what we quickly came to understand in working through this a couple of years ago was that Roger Goodell treats the owners differently than he treats players or coaches or executives. So Roger Goodell's job, which we can't forget, his job is to protect the owners. He works for the owners and he works at the pleasure of the owners. And he has almost 64 million reasons why he wants to make them happy. And that, includes Dan Snyder, even if he has to hold his nose and make Dan Snyder happy. So it didn't really surprise me that, we learn, or we have confirmed that Snyder was involved in figuring out what the punishment would be. But even back then, we knew, because they didn't use the word suspension, for example, that was a negotiated press release that they put out, and that it talked about all of the changes that they were making in the organization, which was the line, which was the story that the team had been trying to push out for a while, including to me. So, I think we've confirmed what I and my clients long suspected was the case, which was this was all negotiated by Snyder. Now, whether that's because Goodell wants to protect him like he protects all the owners, or because Snyder had some leverage, had some dirt, like this blackmail PowerPoint they're talking about, I don't know. It may be a combination of all of that.
Lisa Banks with us here on the Hoffman Show. So I want to ask you about the blackmail presentation in a moment, but kind of the most important question I wanted to ask you today, and what immediately came to my mind yesterday, is this. If your clients agreed to the Wilkinson investigation based off the premise that the results were going to become public, and now we get this reporting that part of the reason they didn't become public is because Goodell was essentially blackmailed by this PowerPoint and negotiated with Snyder to do something different than was promised to your clients. Does that open any legal avenues, repercussions potentially of having your clients participate in this investigation under a false pretense?
Absolutely, it could lead to legal action, and I've raised that issue before with the NFL directly, that I felt that my clients were misled about what would happen. They took great risks in coming forward. Some of them, many of them, still worked for the organization at that time. They were all afraid that Snyder and the team would retaliate against them. So they took great risks in coming forward to talk with Beth Wilkinson. And everyone operated on the assumption, including Beth Wilkinson, I would add, that she was going to do her investigation. She was going to write a report, and then some version of those findings would be released. So obviously we were all surprised when that didn't happen. And it could lead certainly to legal action. I will tell you, however, that Mary Jo White is currently doing an investigation. And before many of my clients would participate in that investigation, which was it wasn't quite a redo of Wilkinson's investigation because it was more narrowly focused, but we got a specific promise from both Mary Jo White and the NFL that these findings would be made public. And we did that because we wanted to be assured that we had a definite promise. And I will tell you that if we see some sort of watered down, truncated whitewash of a report that comes out, or the findings, or no findings at all, that will likely lead directly to legal action.
So I want to dive in a little bit deeper here, because Lisa, this will not surprise you. I'm not a lawyer. I do not know, like, logically, everything you're saying makes sense, which is why I wanted to ask the questions and pursue this avenue of questioning. But under, like, what's the statute, what's the law that would provide the avenue for legal action on both the Wilkinson, and obviously it sounds like there's perhaps a more ironclad agreement on the Mary Jo White side of it? How would that actually work?
Right. So they're basically definite promises that are made, and then somebody relies on a promise that is broken to their detriment. So just very simply, it's sort of a detrimental reliance type theory.
Okay.
And it's sort of like almost like a quasi-contractual theory. So it's not a statute per se. It's not a statutory claim. It's a common law claim. But certainly we believe that if after making those promises and my clients acting in reliance on those promises, if they suffer harm as a result, then that would be actionable. And so we would certainly consider and pursue any legal action available. That said, I still remain cautiously optimistic that we are going to see the legitimate findings from the Mary Jo White report. And I think if that happens, that will be good enough for my clients who have wanted transparency all along. And so if they get that, then they will be happy to move on, because they will have had that transparency into some of the wrongdoing at the team and by Snyder specifically. And we will be watching Dan Snyder leave town. And so together, that is accountability. That is the accountability that we came into this seeking. So, we'll be very happy, and we'll be happy to declare that, this fight was worthwhile and declare victory.
Lisa Banks with us here on the Hoffman Show. You mentioned the blackmail PowerPoint, as it's referred to in the story, and apparently that term was kind of thrown around the league as this PowerPoint came to be known. Or quickly to summarize for the audience that may not have read the piece, when Dan went to meet with Roger Goodell and other representatives at the league, and Dan's representatives, to discuss his suspension and potential punishment, instead of a defense of Dan to try to get him a lighter punishment, his lawyers from Reed Smith, a New York-based firm, basically brought this PowerPoint of other damning emails, other things that could hurt the NFL, as if to say, if you go hard after our client, like, this stuff will find its way out. into the press. And I'm just curious, in your career, Lisa, as a lawyer, like, what do you make of those tactics and the fact that it actually seemed to work on Roger Goodell based off of Don and Seth's reporting?
Well, I mean, first of all, those kinds of tactics, particularly if they're coming from lawyers, are just sleazy and despicable. And I think everybody can agree to that. I don't think that it's unusual, though, for this particular group, because what I have experienced over the last few years is that the MO of the team and these lawyers are to discredit and embarrass anybody who comes forward to make allegations. And it doesn't have to be related to anything relevant in the allegations. So several of my clients were targeted by the team after coming forward publicly with where emails and photographs or other things were disseminated or put forward in an attempt to discredit or embarrass. Completely unrelated, but just trying to throw mud. So this is clearly the MO. And in that blackmail PowerPoint, which absolutely rings true based on my experience, my understanding is that also included in that PowerPoint, which was not reported in the ESPN article, but has been reported elsewhere, and I think it was the same PowerPoint, were slides attacking a number of other individuals, including reporters who had written stories about the team, including lawyers such as myself who had advocated against the team, and including a number of my clients who had come forward to report their own experiences. So the blackmail PowerPoint attempted to smear all sorts of people, not just league executives, but everybody around this scandal who was trying to hold the team accountable.
A heavily redacted version of that was part of the evidence released by Congress. And I have always wondered, Lisa, as someone who was on the beat at the time that some of these things were happening, if my page was one of the ones redacted. I don't know. I don't think it was, but there's a chance. I've always wondered. Lisa Banks is with us.
You could be. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's a good club. Anytime as a journalist, you can be in the same club as Liz Clark. I'm there.
I agree with that.
Obviously, you can't violate attorney-client privileges, so I'm asking this in the most general sense that you can answer. But I'm sure you've been talking to your clients over the past 24 hours since this story, past 36 hours since this story dropped. Did yesterday and seeing this reporting change anything for them, or is it still kind of the same mission ahead and this is yet another bump in the road?
It's the same mission ahead. Our goals don't change. And like I said, even though this reporting confirmed a number of things, there were things we knew or suspected. So I think the reaction here is, in some respects, an eye roll, like, yeah, well, no surprise there. The NFL and the Washington Commanders, this whole saga has been a total clown show, and I'm not trying to diminish it. It's just, none of these guys seems to be able to make a decision that doesn't blow up in their face. And I think one of the interesting things about Don's article is that it showed that, whoever leaked these emails, whether it was Snyder, Camp, whether it was NFL executives or both, that blew up spectacularly for all parties involved, but particularly Snyder, right? Who probably, but for that leak, would still have the team or not be selling the team. So, it is more of the same for us. We've been dealing with these kind of revelations now for the past 3 years, and we're trying to keep our eyes on the ball and keep moving forward to our goal, which is transparency into what happened and accountability for those responsible. And, I have every belief we're going to get there.
Yeah. The analogy I used yesterday on the show was Dan is Wile E. Coyote. He lit the fuse, not realizing that the giant stack of TNT was actually just right behind him. and it's set to explode a week from now. The last thing I want to ask you on the way out, as Lisa Banks is with us here on the Hoffman Show, is about the Washington Post story that comes out late last night. I think most of us read it this morning. About how Dan is continuing to saber rattle here at the last second. And I don't know if this is anywhere in your area of expertise of law, but as someone who's closely following this story and has a better chance of answering this than me, I'm going to ask you anyway. As far as I know, this deal has been signed, and the last thing that has to happen is the owners have to vote on it. So this last minute saber rattling, this last minute negotiating, potentially, if there's actual substance here, like, what do you make of this last minute kind of freak out by people telling the Washington Post that they're all of a sudden nervous about next Thursday?
I think until the ink is dry on the full agreement and not just the term sheet, anything can happen. And so, the devil is in the details. And we knew that, for example, indemnification and what they were going to do with the Mary Jo White report, all of those things had been in negotiation. I don't know if the ESPN reporting or something related to these allegations of the leaks or Gruden's lawsuit somehow threw a monkey wrench into this, because everybody is very concerned about indemnification. And so I have every reason to believe they'll work it out and they'll figure out a path forward. But these are difficult issues. I don't have an answer as to what it was that was the issue, but it seems to me like the Post reporting on this was pretty good, and it seems really to be related to the indemnification and the concerns that everybody has that they're all going to get sued.
Yeah. Lisa Banks with us, of course, attorney for the more than 40 former Washington football employees who have been really, as I described it yesterday, Lisa, the only heroes in a story largely full of villains. So appreciate your time here on the show, and I certainly hope that this is not the last time we speak.
All right. Thanks very much.